Morning all. The fallout from those Downing Street lockdown parties continues, with 4 of Boris Johnson's senior aides leaving in a mass exodus from No.10. Meanwhile, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, widely touted as a possible successor to the Prime Minister, he's been adding to the pressure on the PM over the row about Jimmy Savile and the leader of the Labour Party. Well, overnight, the Conservatives did win the Southend West by-election, with one Conservative MP telling Sky News that people were worried about the cost of living and just wanted Boris Johnson to get on with running the country. From Southend, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, reports.
I do hereby declare that Annalisa Firth is duly elected.
A brief respite from the turmoil in Downing Street for Boris Johnson as the Conservatives held Southend West early this morning in the by-election caused by the stabbing of popular veteran MP Sir David Amess in October. But Tories here admitted the Partygate scandal engulfing the Prime Minister, calls for him to quit and the cost of living crisis were raised by voters.
On the doorstep, people are worried about the cost of living. The announcement Rishi's made are in the right direction. But, summed up by one saying, for God's sake, tell Boris just to get on and run the country.
Back at Westminster, MPs claim the near meltdown in 10 Downing Street after an exodus of 4 members of the PM's inner circle in one day has further increased pressure on the embattled Premier. Their Chief of Staff, Dan Rosenfield, blamed by some for allowing a drinking culture in No.10. Martin Reynolds, dubbed Party Marty, after writing the notorious Bring Your Own Booze email. And Director of Communications Jack Doyle, said to have attended at least one of the parties under investigation. The 4th, Policy Chief Munira Mirza, resigned, bitterly attacking the PM over his claim that Sir Keir Starmer failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. That claim also prompted a rebuke from Rishi Sunak, in a move seen as distancing himself from Mr Johnson ahead of a leadership contest.
With regard to the comments, being honest, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister clarified what he meant.
And the Chancellor has turned up the heat on the PM in an article in today's Sun. We have always been the party of sound money, he writes. We will always continue to be on my watch. And that is the only kind of party I am interested in. After what Boris Johnson's critics claim has been a chaotic week in Downing Street, because Labour and the Liberal Democrats were not standing in this by-election, the Conservatives were always going to win by a landslide. But the big battle for votes for the Prime Minister now is with those MPs who want to oust him. The PM will hope his Downing Street shake-up, which took place while voters here were going to the polls, will buy him some time. John Craig, Sky News, Southend.
Lots to talk about then, pleased to say. The Minister for Energy, Clean Growth and Climate Change, Greg Hands, joins us in the studio.
Morning.
Good to see you in the flesh, Minister. And I think you know where we're going to start this morning. 4 very, very senior individuals in No.10 have left or are about to leave. With the greatest respect, just what the hell is going on in No.10 at the moment?
Well, let's not forget that on Monday, the Prime Minister, when responding to the Sue Gray report update, made clear that there would be changes at the top in No.10. Resignations have been made. Resignations have been accepted. These are all people who've done fantastic service to the country throughout the pandemic in almost all of those cases, and we should be thankful for them for their service. But the Prime Minister was absolutely clear on Monday that there will be changes at the top in No.10, and that is what he's delivered.
Well, 3 of the resignations may well be a response to Sue Gray. Munira Mirza, who we'll talk about in a second, that has nothing to do with that. But in terms of the 3 that you identify as a response to the Sue Gray update, why didn't the Prime Minister wait for the Metropolitan Police to conclude their investigation?
Well, because he was clear on Monday that there would be changes to the operation.
Yeah, but he didn't say he was going to do those immediately.
Obviously,
he did say to, and I have to admit, it's been the mantra from government for many weeks now. Wait for Sue Gray. Sue Gray provided an update. Then it was wait for the Metropolitan Police investigation to conclude. Hasn't the Prime Minister, in accepting these resignations or perhaps even pushing for them, simply, drawn conclusions that he shouldn't have done before the Met had done their job.
No, I disagree with that. This is about the Prime Minister saying that there were the Sugray report update said that there were failings at the top of the operation. This is the Prime Minister taking charge. It's a wider issue than just the Sugray report. It's actually saying that we need changes at number 10, which is what the Prime Minister said he would deliver on Monday.
OK, so who are replacing the Chief of Staff then? Who's replacing the Chief of Staff?
Well, I understand that Dan Rosenfield is carrying on until such a time as he is replaced. We will see. I would expect the Prime Minister to appoint a very, very capable person or capable people in those roles. It is, after all, a great honour to work at number 10 and to serve your country. And I'd expect very capable people to be in there.
See, the only problem with that analysis is that if this was part of some carefully thought out and constructed plan, surely you would have the names of those who would be replacing them ready to go. Isn't the simple fact of the matter that the Prime Minister rushed out a couple of resignations that were planned for next week because Munira Mirza marched out the front gate number 10?
Well, the resignation of Munira Mirza is a little bit different. I accept that. She made clear her reasons for her resignation. The Prime Minister equally clear that he disagreed with her. But nonetheless, Munira is somebody who's put in an amazing service. I know as a London MP, the incredible role she's played for Boris Johnson, both as Mayor of London, now as Prime Minister. And we shouldn't leave without paying tribute to the amazing work that she's done for the people of London, the people of the country, over the past 15 years.
Sure. Well, let's not gloss over why Munira Mirza quit number 10. There are suggestions that there are plenty of other reasons rather than those stated, but let's just take a quick look at the stated reasons, if we can bring up that graphic. She says this: I believe it was wrong for you to imply this week that Keir Starmer was personally responsible for allowing Jimmy Savile to escape justice. There was no fair or reasonable basis for that assertion. She continues: you're a better man than many of your detractors will ever understand, which is why it is so desperately sad that you let yourself down by making a scurrilous accusation against the leader of the opposition. And it's not just Munira Mirza who feels that the Prime Minister spoke out of turn in linking Jimmy Savile to Keir Starmer. Here's what the Chancellor had to say on this particular topic yesterday.
With regard to the comments, being honest, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister clarified what he meant.
So you've got Munira Mirza resigning over this, the Chancellor saying he wouldn't have said it, Simon Clarke, of course, saying that he believed it was an entirely reasonable remark. Would you have said it?
Look, the Prime Minister was clear yesterday in response to Munira Mirza's resignation that he disagrees with the basis of her resignation, what she had to say. The Prime Minister was also clear on Wednesday that he was referring back to the public apology made by Sir Keir Starmer in, I think it was 2013, and it was all about a wider thing, about taking responsibility for an organisation, for the failings within an organisation.
Would you have said it in the way that the Prime Minister did, protected by parliamentary privilege at PMQs?
Well, look, the Prime Minister said that he disagreed yesterday with the basis of the resignation of what Munira Mirza had to say. And that, I think, is the end of the matter.
Well, it's not the end of the matter, because I'm going to ask the question for a third time. Would you have said it?
Look, I'm saying the Prime Minister disagreed with what she had to say. That is the important thing here. These are all events that happened many, many years ago. The time is now to move on and look at what the country wants us to focus on, which is recovery from the pandemic, further vaccination rollout, move to net zero, the energy transition.
I get the impression I'm not going to make much headway on that particular question. So let's do that which you ask and move on to the measures which the Chancellor was announcing yesterday. Measures which I'm sure plenty of people will warmly welcome. Extra money as we see the cost of living soar. But let's just look at a couple of the ways in which the Chancellor described the council tax money and the energy cap money yesterday. Let's just have a quick look at what he said yesterday. He said this: it's a flat rate, a flat £200 and a flat £150. That's obviously going to mean more to families on lower incomes or with lower energy bills. So in that sense, it's a progressive measure that will help those families more. Has Rishi Sunak just redefined progressive?
No, I sat next to him in the House of Commons when he made the announcement yesterday. As we know, energy bills, I'm the energy minister, are quite regressive. Therefore, the more that you can provide for those on lower and middle incomes, the better. That is why we've also done things like the rise in the national living wage from £8.91 an hour to £9.50 an hour, giving somebody on the national living wage an extra £1,000 in their pay packet. These council tax rises for those living in bands A to D, and also the households on energy, with the energy bills, that £200 discount on their energy bills. All of these will give a lot of help to those, not just on low incomes, but also middle incomes, who are going to be hit by the rise in energy bills that will come in from April.
But it's just that whenever politicians have used the term progressive in the past, particularly progressive taxation or so on, it's a measure which takes into account the circumstances of the individual affected. This pays no attention. Certainly the £200 towards energy bills pays absolutely no heed to the individual circumstances, does it?
Well, look, the overall package, so things like the council tax rebate for those living in bands A to D properties. There's also £144 million for local authorities to deal with people who, for example, are in low income but have high energy bills. These are all very progressive measures, as, of course, as the national living wage increase and the changes in the universal credit taper rate. All of these will actually really help people on low and middle incomes.
Again, I'll just make the point. It doesn't strike me as particularly progressive to be handing out to everyone, those who desperately need it and those who perhaps do not desperately need it, £200. But more than that, why are we describing it as a rebate when it is pretty clearly a loan?
OK, it is a discount. First of all, you've got to look at, in terms of whether the message, whether the whole set of measures are progressive, you've got to look at all of the measures that were announced by the Chancellor yesterday and at the budget in November. We are describing the energy bill change as a discount. The council tax is a rebate. The council tax gets given to you £200 one-off, will not be repaid. The £200 on energy bills is a discount because that will be repaid by the bill payer. But over a 5-year period, that's quite a long period of time to be able to repay that.
The reason for the 5-year period, as I understand it, is by that point you seem fairly certain that that is when wholesale prices, energy prices, may have returned to normal.
No,
So
I'm not predicting energy prices.
Sure.
But what we are saying is that energy prices have been incredibly volatile.
Of course, of course.
You know, they're 4 to 5 times the average over the last 25 years at the moment, but they're actually equally half the peak. So energy prices are very volatile. We're not doing a prediction on energy prices. What we are saying is that people need help now, which is why we are giving people the £200 discount, which will come in October.
But it's certainly been mentioned by those in government that 2024 is a point by which, you know, the wholesale prices market may well have just calmed down a little bit. That's certainly, there's been something that's said. So I'm wondering, with energy prices expected to remain at high levels for a number of years, is this a one-off? It can't be a one-off, can it?
Well, we'll have to see what the decisions of the future in relation to energy.
You're not ruling it out. You're not suggesting that this is a one-off payment and that's it.
Look,
there may well be future assistance.
It is my job to make sure the country is prepared on all things related to energy. It's not my job to make, if you like, energy price forecasts for the future. Energy prices have been elevated for the last 9 months or so. They've also been very volatile in that time. That is why we're bringing in that support right up front, the £9 billion package of support announced by the Chancellor yesterday in response to energy price rises and other price rises coming in this year. But
just on the council tax rebate, I mean, the Times describes it as loopy and lopsided. The point that they make, London boroughs with huge property prices will receive the same as properties in the Midlands and the North, indeed, that actually pay hundreds more in council tax. Again, not progressive.
Well, that's why we've got the £144 million extra for local authorities to look at those cases where somebody is on low income but has a high energy bill, e.g. living in a high-value property that will be in council tax bands E and above. That's also why that fund is there also for people who don't pay council tax, people on very low incomes who don't pay council tax at all. That is why we have the £144 million local authority fund.
Why does the Prime Minister seemingly not pay any heed to the optics of what he is doing at the moment? I mean, let's just reflect on what happened yesterday. The Bank of England told us that we're in for a record slide in living standards. That, you know, the governor of the Bank of England himself, on roughly, well, in excess of 500 grand a year, tells us all not to ask for big pay rises. On that day, the Prime Minister, to an event in Blackpool, takes a private plane.
Well, look, I can promise you the Prime Minister travels by train a lot. I see him on the train. He going by train is like... The Prime Minister loves trains and buses.
I mean, we all kicked off about Liz Truss taking the plane to Australia.
OK, well,
you can't expect us not to kick off about this.
Hold on a minute. The Prime Minister's had a difficult schedule this week. Don't forget, he's responded to the Sue Gray update on Monday. He's been to the Ukraine on Tuesday. That is a long distance.
He shaved 50 minutes off his journey by flying in the private jet.
Well, hold on. But he's come back on Wednesday to answer Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. On Thursday, he's in Blackpool. That is a difficult schedule for anybody at the best of times. And I know the Prime Minister, and he is somebody who instinctively loves public transport. That's what I saw when he was Mayor of London. I was one of his MPs in London. He is somebody who loves public transport, but that's been a difficult, you would agree, that's a difficult, challenging schedule this week for him.
Minister, great to have you on the programme this morning.
Thanks
for joining us. Now, a quick run through the front pages of the newspapers that we have. Of course, we've got all of them, in fact. The Guardian, leading on those resignations at number 10, after 4 of Boris Johnson's key aides left their posts. Meltdown in Downing Street, that's the front of the Mail. It says the departure of Munira Mirza left the Prime Minister in shock. The Eye says it was the day Boris Johnson's top team quit number 10 en masse. Both the Chancellor and the Bank of England setting out measures to tackle the cost of living crisis. The FT is reporting that disposable incomes in the UK are at their tightest for 30 years. And the Metro calls the announcement of those plans and the fiscal strife that many people are facing a perfect storm. Just a reminder that on Monday at 9 o'clock, Kay Burley will be joined by this chap, the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, answering all your questions. You can send them in via Twitter. You can send a video clip or email asktheeducationsecretary@sky.uk. Still to come on the show this morning, a Winter Olympics like no other. We'll be getting a Chinese perspective on the Beijing Games. Then at 8 o'clock, I'll be joined by the Shadow Secretary of State for Climate Change and Net Zero, Ed Miliband. And a little later on, I'll be speaking to the oldest pair of rowers to cross the Atlantic. Rescue teams have been working around the clock to save a 5-year-old boy who fell down a 100-foot well in Morocco. They are now within feet of him, but there are concerns about his safety because of the freezing temperatures. Sky's Kamali Melbourne reports.
5-year-old Rayan has been trapped 100 feet down a narrow well for 3 days. The rescue effort has been frantic.
I managed to communicate with the child and asked if he could hear me. There was a response. I waited for a minute and saw that he began using the oxygen. I then asked to be lifted back, and in the first attempt, I failed. In the second attempt, I lost consciousness, especially in the last 10 meters, until I woke and found people administering first aid on me.
It happened in the northern Moroccan village of Ignan. Huge excavators are now at work stripping away the earth. A camera was lowered showing Ryan alive. He's been given oxygen and water through pipes, and his family can only wait.
I prayed to God and begged him to get him out of that well alive and safe. Please, God, ease my pain and his in that hole of dust.
The rescue has gripped the nation and the region. #SaveRyan has been trending. A local government spokesman said his rescue is approaching. Kamali Melbourne, Sky News.
Well, let's return to the crisis in Ukraine now. And the United States has claimed that Russia is preparing to stage a fake attack on its own troops in order to justify an invasion of Ukraine.
As part of this fake attack, we believe that Russia would produce a very graphic propaganda video, which would include corpses and actors that would be depicting mourners and images of destroyed locations, as well as military equipment at the hands of Ukraine or the West.
Well, in the last hour or so, President Vladimir Putin has arrived in China for talks with President Xi Jinping. Our Asia correspondent, Tom Cheshire, joins us now from Beijing. Morning, Tom. Good to see you. So what is on the table for discussion then?
Morning, Neil. A lot on the table for discussion. They haven't seen each other for 2 years because President Xi Jinping hasn't received any world leader for 2 years. Luckily, it is Vladimir Putin who he's described as his best friend. And the situation on Ukraine will be top of the agenda. Chinese and Russian foreign ministries have said they've already coordinated their position. But I think we'll see some specifics come out of that in terms of trade deals, in terms of energy deals. President Putin talked about this in an editorial he wrote for Chinese state media, talking about energy supplies to China. That could be very useful in the context of Ukraine. If gas supplies to Europe are cut, this is another revenue stream, not just in the short term, but in the long term, to prop up the Russian economy. And they said they'd already been working on how to mitigate the impact of unilateral sanctions, a reference to the package of sanctions that the US is preparing in the event of a Russian invasion. So it does look like they are on one front. Chinese state media describe them as standing back to back against their opponents. And it does feel like a moment. You won't have any Western leaders at the opening ceremony for this Olympics, but you will have Putin and Xi sitting side by side in the front row, perhaps representing a new world order, at least a marriage of convenience. And there have been questions about whether, as a result of the Olympics, Putin would invade. Would Xi ask his very good friend Vladimir Putin not to spoil his ceremony, not to rain on his parade, because there's a lot of work that's gone into this. All eyes will be on Beijing this evening, local time, afternoon time in the UK, as those Olympics kick off. That might be the case. There may be some Olympic truce, but I think both these countries look after their own interests first before anything else. And one thing to remember is that back in 2008, the first Olympics in Beijing, the Summer Olympics, the eve of that opening ceremony was the same evening we got reports, the first reports of Russian troops moving into Georgia. So it's not a done deal, but this is a real burgeoning friendship. I think that'll be on full display when we get a few pictures later.
Tom, for now, thanks very much indeed. Now, the Pentagon has said the killing of the leader of Islamic State has dealt a significant blow to the terrorist group. Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qureshi detonated a bomb which killed him, his wife and his children after being targeted by US special forces in northwestern Syria. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, will announce today a new 10-year plan to improve England's cancer care. During the pandemic, there have been 50,000 fewer cancer diagnoses across the UK, risking an increase in advanced cases, which are harder to treat. Our correspondent, Ashna Huranak, joins us now from the newsroom. Good morning to you, Ashna. Take us through what we're expecting to hear from the Health Secretary then.
Yeah, of course. First of all, 50,000 fewer cases of cancer being picked up across the UK over the past couple of years. That is despite, of course, cancer services remaining a top priority for the NHS. But this is a plan being outlined by the Health Secretary to try and overhaul the way that cancer care is delivered in England. He's going to want to hear from people who have experienced that care themselves, so cancer patients, relatives of those that have got loved ones that have had cancer, but also NHS workers. The whole plan really is to culminate this 10-year booster programme to try and improve the way that it's tackled. Boosting the cancer workforce is what he wants to do, increasing research into new technologies, things like proton beam therapy, but also bolstering vaccine capabilities. We've seen what vaccines can do over the pandemic. He thinks that there could be scope to strengthen the way that cancer is treated through vaccines. The call for evidence opens today, Neil, and that structure for that 10-year plan will be outlined at the end of the year. Cancer is the biggest cause of death in the UK, and this is one way the Health Secretary plans to overhaul it.
Ashna, thank you. Now, Northern Ireland's First Minister, Palgivan, has resigned from Stormont's power-sharing executive in protest against post-Brexit border checks. Let's head to our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, joining us from Belfast, from just outside Stormont, in fact. Good to see you this morning, Stephen. Looks a bit chilly where you are. Tell us exactly what on earth is going on here. Why the resignation? Because, of course, it means not just the First Minister going, but the Deputy First Minister as well.
Yeah, it's freezing here, Neil. Yes, we've been here before and we're here again. As of this morning, Northern Ireland doesn't have a fully functioning devolved government, Paul Given, as you said there, the First Minister, the DUP First Minister, stepping down last night. And that automatically triggers the resignation of Michelle O'Neill, the Deputy First Minister from Sinn Féin as well, because it's a joint office. So without a First Minister or a Deputy First Minister, the executive, which sits here at Stormont, cannot meet. So effectively, the government is going to limp on at the moment. The other ministers will remain in their posts, but they have one hand tied behind their back. They can't conduct any new business. For example, the Health Minister, Robin Swan, is taking legal advice at the moment to establish what exactly his current powers are. There's supposed to be a meeting next week to discuss getting rid of Northern Ireland's existing coronavirus restrictions, and now nobody knows if that is going to go ahead. And that's an example, I suppose, of how all this political manoeuvring has a real impact on the people of Northern Ireland. Ordinary people here watching all these political jousting with a sort of familiar sense of resignation. It wasn't that long ago that Northern Ireland went 3 years, until January 2020, without a fully functioning executive. Now, it's slightly different this time around. Under the current rules, there's a 7-day period for those posts to be fulfilled before the whole thing comes collapsing down. But at the moment, there's legislation going through Westminster next week, which will extend that for a period of 6 to 9 months. And that brings us up to the election, which is currently scheduled here in Northern Ireland for the 5th of May. Sinn Féin, they're furious with the DUP. They have called for an election to be brought forward, possibly as early as the middle of March. And the DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, last night effectively saying, bring it on. He's saying it is time for the people to have their say. And at the heart of all of this is the DUP's anger with the post-Brexit checks, the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, which established an Irish sea border. And the important thing to remember is, even though this dramatic move went ahead last night, it has done nothing to affect that. That Irish sea border is still in place. The checks, even though the DUP minister in charge tried to scrap them, we believe are still going ahead, at least until next Monday. And against all of this, the negotiations on the protocol are still going on between the EU and the UK. The EU have called all of this extremely unwelcome.
Stephen, you go and warm yourself up. We'll speak again soon. For now, thanks very much indeed. Time for us to have a check on the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And you may have noticed already today looking cold and windy with sunshine and wintry showers, but much of the south will start wet. Early rain spreading across southern Britain will turn to sleet or snow in places before clearing into the southeast. Elsewhere, a more showery start with a slight covering of snow on some hills. It will be windy and cold for many, with icy stretches in the northeast. A reminder as to our top stories. The Energy Minister, Greg Hands, has told Sky News Breakfast that the departure of 4 senior aides from No.10 shows that Boris Johnson is taking charge. The United States claims that Russia is plotting a fake attack to justify an invasion of Ukraine as President Putin arrives in Beijing for talks with the Chinese president. And the Health Secretary is to announce a new 10-year plan to improve England's cancer care after 50,000 fewer diagnoses were made during the pandemic. Well, the fallout from the Downing Street lockdown parties continues, with 4 of Boris Johnson's most senior aides leaving in a mass exodus from No.10. But in the last half an hour, the Energy Minister, Greg Hands, told me that the Prime Minister is the one in control of the situation.
This is about the Prime Minister saying that there were, the Sue Gray report update said that there were failings at the top of the operation. This is the Prime Minister taking charge. It's a wider issue than just the Sue Gray report. It's actually saying that we need changes at No.10, which is what the Prime Minister said he would deliver on Monday.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Joe Pike, who has stood outside No.10 for us. Good to see you, Joe. What are we to make of that? I suppose you could just about argue that the Prime Minister was taking charge, clearing house, responding to the Sue Gray update, were it not for the fact that Munira Mirza wandered out the front door of No.10 saying that this was entirely to do with Jimmy Savile.
Exactly, Neil. Part of what happened yesterday was Boris Johnson taking charge because the 3 men in senior roles who have left were effectively sacked because they mishandled the fallout of the Partygate row, and they needed to go. A lot of MPs wanted them to go. But as you say, Munira Mirza, who was the head of policy here at Downing Street, quit. She resigned because she was so angry about that Jimmy Savile jibe aimed at Keir Starmer that Boris Johnson yesterday sort of semi-U-turned on, but didn't actually fully apologise. It also suggests, one, that there's been an argument on that issue for 3 days here, but also that there are tensions, and have been tensions, between Ms Mirza and the Prime Minister probably for a number of weeks or months, and this was the final straw. The other significant thing that the Minister touched on and happened yesterday was that comment from Rishi Sunak here at Downing Street News Conference, giving his own view on the PM's Jimmy Savile Keir Starmer jibe, saying he wouldn't have said it, although he didn't say that Boris Johnson necessarily should have apologised. That, I think, Neil, is the sign of a fissure, a small split at the very top of government. Of course, if that develops into a bigger, wider gap, it really could be problematic for the Prime Minister.
Joe, thank you. Now, China has promised a Winter Olympics to remember, despite, of course, the continuing difficulties caused by the COVID pandemic. The opening ceremony takes place in Beijing in just a few hours' time. Victor Gao is the Vice President of the Centre for China and Globalisation. Very pleased to say he joins us now from Beijing. Victor, great to have you on the programme this morning. You must be incredibly excited ahead of the opening ceremony.
Absolutely. The opening ceremony is about 4 hours from now. And I think the whole Chinese nation are looking forward to this glorious display of Olympic tradition. And I think the whole world is also holding its breath to see what will happen on this very spectacular day of the opening ceremony for the Beijing Winter Olympics. And Beijing will be carved into history as the only city which has hosted both the Winter Olympics as well as the Summer Olympics. So this is a very extraordinary day for China and for the whole world.
Of course, major sporting events, particularly the Olympics, do try to separate out the sporting achievement of the athletes from perhaps broader political concerns. But the fact that Britain, the United States and Canada are all partaking in diplomatic boycotts of the Winter Olympics because they're being held in Beijing, that does somewhat take the sheen off the event.
Well, I feel very sorry for those Western country leaders who decided not to come to attend the Beijing Winter Olympics. I think such so-called diplomatic boycott is really barking at the wrong tree and is not consequential at all. I've equated that to the equivalent of launching a hunger strike after your dinner until breakfast in the morning. It will not change or impact upon the Beijing Winter Olympics. And I think these Western leaders will feel sorry once they see the glory and the spectacular display of the Olympic spirit starting tonight and for the coming 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks. Then I think they will feel sorry about their absence from the Beijing Winter Olympics.
Would athletes be permitted then to make political statements?
Well, Olympics has its tradition and discipline. Olympic occasion is not a place for politics, and I hope athletes from everywhere in the world, including from the United States and the United Kingdom, will abide by the Olympic tradition and will focus on the sports activities and try to excel among their peers rather than being diverted into political activities. Olympic game is not the appropriate place to do politics.
Still, in the margins, it often takes place. We know, of course, that Vladimir Putin is flying in, and I'm certain that he will be very interested in the sporting achievements that are on display, but also his meeting with Xi Jinping will be of pivotal importance. What do you make of the suggestions that we are at the beginning, once again, of a Cold War?
President Putin of Russia has already arrived in Beijing. He's preparing to attend the opening ceremony, which will start 8 o'clock tonight, Beijing time. He will be one of the about 30 world leaders from different countries and from the United Nations in the form of the Secretary General Guterres. And I think the gathering of the global leaders for the Beijing Olympics will be about 3 times more than the gathering of world leaders attending the Tokyo Summer Olympics. So talking about the diplomatic boycott, it's not consequential at all. However, it is true that the Beijing Winter Olympics takes place at a very critical time in global geopolitics. And I think the crisis surrounding Ukraine is really making the whole world very jittery. I hope President Putin and President Xi Jinping of China will have time to talk about what exactly is happening and will be able to come up with more concerted actions, because we do not want to see a war unfolding in Ukraine. And I still believe that peace and diplomacy will prevail. It is not time for Europe or for Asia to plunge into war. That is really against the fundamental interest of countries and people everywhere in the world.
Well, Victor, let's both of us then park the politics just for 1 second so I can ask you just finally, we are looking forward to the sporting events themselves. Which athletes are you looking forward to seeing, particularly if they might not come from where you're from?
Well, I believe the Beijing Winter Olympics will be the best occasion for athletes very good at winter sports to compete and excel. And traditionally, you have several countries which are very good in winter sports, countries like Norway, Canada, the United States, and sometimes the United Kingdom, for example. They have very deep traditions about winter sports. Switzerland is another one, Austria and Italy, for example. Traditionally, China is not very strong in winter sports. However, I think the Beijing Winter Olympics will be the occasion for rallying hundreds of millions of the Chinese, and it is expected about 300 million Chinese will become fans of winter sports, and this will be a big boost for winter sports of all kinds in China. It will be a big boost to the international Olympic movement. And I think whichever athletes from whichever country who wins the medals will be cheered by the audience here in China, and they will be cheered by their countrymen and the leaders of their governments throughout the world. And it's encouraging to see that President Biden of the United States already promised that he will be watching the opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympics, not personally here in Beijing, but on television.
Victor Gao, good to have you on the programme this morning. Enjoy the games and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
The UK's Medicines and Healthcare Regulator has given researchers the go-ahead to study the therapeutic effects of medical cannabis on patients suffering from long COVID. Scientists believe it could help to relieve things such as fatigue and breathlessness. It's believed the condition affects around 1 in 7 people who've contracted COVID-19. Well, joining us now on the programme, Kyle Esplin, who himself has been receiving medical cannabis to treat a post-viral condition, and Dr. Elizabeth Iverson, the principal investigator of the study at Drug Science. Kyle, Elizabeth, lovely to have you both on the programme this morning. But Doctor, I wonder if we might start from you. Just explain the reason for this study. What is it you are trying to establish?
Thanks for having me on. As part of my work as a stroke and neurorehabilitation physician, I treat many patients that have a constellation of lots of different symptoms, such as fatigue, sleeplessness, insomnia, and pain. I've also had patients that have fatigue related to post-viral symptoms. Medical cannabis I've used as a tool to try to help some of these symptoms, which are very similar to the patients that I'm seeing now presenting with long COVID, which is again an umbrella term for a collection of symptoms, which, as you said, includes fatigue, breathlessness, and muscle aches and muscle weakness. So this study is looking to see whether medical cannabis in the form of an oil has the potential to try and improve symptoms and improve quality of life of those patients that have symptoms of long COVID.
Sure. Kyle, we will come to you in just a second, but just before we do, Doctor, what is it about cannabis, or medical cannabis, I should be specific, that may well help with conditions like this? What are the properties involved?
Yeah, so cannabis is again, is quite a broad term to describe a plant which contains lots of different molecules.
Indeed.
and consist and things that the cannabis plant contains lots of different molecules in it. There's over 144 cannabinoids, for example, in the plant, and there's many different strains of cannabis and types of cannabis. And some of those types of cannabis, when given carefully and prescribed and supervised, can have quite uplifting, stimulating properties and help with fatigue. The CBD particularly, which is the dominant property of the cannabis oil that we're using, has shown to be quite stimulating and helps with fatigue. It can also help with sleep and pain as well. And it's to do with the different properties within the cannabis plant that can help with these symptoms.
Kyle, I mean, as mentioned, you've been taking medical cannabis since, I think, 2019, but you developed a condition, well, way before that, didn't you? Just tell us a little bit about the struggles that you've had.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on there. So my background's in the entertainment industry, and back in 2012, I was traveling the world, having a great life, doing high-energy stage shows, and I was performing on a cruise ship when I was struck down by a respiratory viral infection. And it was a viral infection like I'd never had before. My health deteriorated severely, and it continued to deteriorate over a period of 6 months. And I went from being a high-energy individual to someone who was unable to look after myself. I couldn't bathe, couldn't wash, and I needed care. And there was no medical options available to bring me back to life, to bring me back to functionality at the time. And I'm so pleased that medical cannabis has come up and getting this attention now in the research it deserves to bring this to be available to more people to be able to benefit also.
Sure. But tell us then, just in what way did medical cannabis improve your quality of life? Because it sounds like it was pretty grim for a time.
So I had a long list of symptoms. One of the worst ones is a post-exertional malaise, which is these relapses which prevent you from recovering. So I was already suffering from extreme pain, extreme fatigue, extreme intolerance of I had new allergies develop. Everything was dysfunctional. And when I started using cannabis as medicine, it's like it turned down the volume on all the symptoms, and they just all quietened down, and they allowed my body to heal and recover and regain strength. And I was able to regain a level of physical fitness and functionality that I never expected I was going to achieve.
Well, I'm very pleased that it has had such a positive effect. Dr. Iveson, we're just about to run out of time, but at what point do you think this clinical trial, this trial will be at an end? When do we expect to hear some conclusions from your research?
Yeah, I mean, the trial's running for 6 months from now. So we would expect to hear some outcomes within the next 5 to 6 months. And the patients are going to be monitored very carefully. And hopefully this will hopefully lead on to a bigger trial in the future if the safety and tolerability of medical cannabis and long COVID is demonstrated.
We will keep fingers crossed on your behalf. Dr. Elizabeth Iveson, Kyle Esplin, great to have you in the programme this morning.
Thank you.